Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to Lesson 20 in this series, Learning C++ by Making Games. In this video, we'll go over strings. This video and this series have been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors like Nemian Games. In this video, we'll go over characters as strings, using strings themselves, and tips and tricks when working with strings. We can work with characters as if they were strings by using character sequences. A character sequence is an array that stores characters. This array can store a word or multiple words, but at the end of the day, it is just individual characters in an array. So, for example, if we wanted to have the word hello, we would have to store it as individual characters, HELLO, and a null terminator. So if we had a character array named hello and called that array up with that initialization, it would output the word hello. And when working with character sequences, there are some things you should be aware of, such as one we've already seen is that you need a null terminator. In addition, working with these arrays can be problematic. If you have a user inputting information, you're going to have to either limit the number of characters they can put in or have a whole bunch of null terminators, as you have to determine the array's size before the array is initialized when the user inputs data. Now, even if you have an array with a size, you still have to initialize it, probably with null terminators anyway, prior to the user inputting data. And you really can't edit this array as easily as you can with strings. So due to character sequences themselves just being a bit cumbersome and a little bit hard to work with, we can use strings. Now I know what I just said is going to sound really weird in light of what I'm about to say, but strings are simply character sequences. But there's a bit of a difference here. Strings are containers. So containers are arrays, vectors, things like that. But they are specifically designed to work with single byte characters, meaning there are certain functions that we can call with strings that make them easier to work with. And therefore, strings are easier to modify. So, how do you use strings? Well, for starters, you need access to the string library. And you get access to the string library by including the string header. So in your header section of your code, you would type in hashtag or # include string. And you can declare and initialize strings using the standard or std namespace and the variable for string. So for example, it would be std : string, your variable name, in this case greetings, followed by what you want stored there, the word hello in this case. And you'll notice that no null terminator is needed. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. It's just like declaring any other variable except for you say std : string. But there are some things we can do with strings. For example, we can use one string to impact on the output of another string. So for example, if we have a string that says hello world, so this is our initial string, and then we have another string that calls initial string and then uses the numbers 6, 5, it will only output the word world. The way this works is that the second string calls the initial string's value, hello world. As you can see in my example on the right, that is the other string in the brackets. It then goes to the start point, which in this case is the 6th character, which is W in our initial string. Remember, start counting with 0. So H is 0, the space between hello and world is 5, and the W is 6. It then runs until the endpoint. So I've given it an endpoint of 5 characters. So starting with the initial character we've included, W, going to the end is 5 characters. Thus we would get world. You can do other things with strings. So if you have some repetitive text, like you want to put a line break in, you don't need to make a string with all the same characters over and over again. In fact, you can use a syntax where you call a string up, you use a number of characters in the first spot when you're initializing it and the text you want to include. However, something to be mindful of, please note the fact that I've used parentheses or round brackets and single quotes here. They are required. And we'll explore why in the next slide. So for example, as I said, if I wanted a line break and wanted 25 X's across the screen, I would do std string line break parenthesis 25 comma X. This will print 25 X's across the screen. Now, again, there's still more you can do with strings. Working with strings means you can also use the ASCII key library. Now, it uses the decimal keys in particular, but something to be aware of. And if you're already familiar with ASCII, you're probably going to go, why am I saying this? But if you're not familiar with ASCII, or you think you're familiar with ASCII and aren't really, then this might be news. ASCII only goes from 0 to 127. So if you're looking at a decimal table, you'll see it usually goes 0 to 127 for the ASCII charts. But you might also have a table that has quote-unquote extended ASCII. Well, there's really no such thing, and anything past 127 would have to be redefined. Now, you can use either parentheses or curly brackets with this. However, there is a difference. If I do line break parenthesis 1042, it will print 10 asterisks. So 10 is the number I'm printing, 42 is the ASCII decimal code for an asterisk. If I do curly bracket 1042, it will go down a new line and then print 1 asterisk. And that is because 10 is the ASCII code for a new line. So if you're using the round brackets, that first number is the number of the next thing that's going to show up on the screen. If you're using curly brackets, everything in the brackets will show up as if it is an ASCII decimal. So again, curly brackets, all the numerical entries will be treated as if they are ASCII inputs. And finally, you can truncate strings. Now, we kind of already seen this from earlier. We can use the first trick I showed you in that we can have an initial string, so our hello world again, and then we can call up the initial string and start at 0 and go 5 characters. So that would cover all the word hello, and we'll output the word hello. Or you could truncate a new string. So I have this new string called trunc for truncate string, where it says hello world, comma, you will never see this, followed by a comma and the number 11. This will output the words hello world only, as hello and world are 5 characters and the space is 1 character. So the syntax for that is fairly simple. It is the string text and the number of displayed characters. This works both with curly brackets and round brackets with no difference in my experience so far. Alright, that said, that covers everything we need to know about strings for our game of Hangman. If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button down below. And if you want to be here when we start working on our Hangman game further, make sure to hit that subscribe and notify icon. And consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. It really does help this channel out. That said, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.